I didn't meet Ethan Marlowe on a red carpet. I met him at 5:12 a.m., in a house so quiet it felt like it was holding its breath. The Marlowe mansion was awake before the sun, awake in the way old money is awake, lights dimmed to a polite glow, hardwood floors polished to the point of reflection, and the air always carrying something expensive and haunted. Lavender furniture polish, fresh-cut garden roses, and, faintest of all, the ghost of a perfume that didn't belong to any living woman in the house anymore. Elena Marlowe's perfume. Ethan stood in the gallery hallway beneath her portrait, not staring at her face exactly, but at the space beside it, like he expected her to step out of the frame, straighten his tie and tell him he'd forgotten the small things again. He was barefoot, billionaire, and broken in the same breath, a man who could buy oceans, yet couldn't purchase 1 hour of peace. He held a mug of coffee he never drank. His knuckles were pale around the handle. The first sound that ever softened him came from the twins' wing. A little laugh, Lucas's laugh, bright and unfiltered, like a bell that refused to learn despair. Then, quieter, the hush of pencils against paper. Noah's language, sketched in shadows, gentle as a secret. That morning, I watched Ethan take a breath like it hurt. Then he turned and walked toward their wing with the slow caution of someone approaching something fragile and sacred. I'm Carlos Vieira. I tell stories for a living, but that house, that family, taught me that stories can also be lifeboats, and that sometimes the smallest hands in the room are the ones that pull a giant back from the edge. A maid was already there when Ethan entered the twins' wing, adjusting the curtains so the first light would fall softly across the playroom. She wasn't wearing anything glamorous. Simple uniform, hair pinned neatly, hands moving with quiet purpose. But the mansion seemed to notice her the way a storm notices the first crack of thunder. Her name was Marisol Reyes. She had come to the Marlowe estate 3 months earlier, hired through an agency so strict it felt like a court. Background checks, polite interviews, smiles that never reached the eyes of the people who ran this household like a machine. Marisol passed every test except the unspoken one. How long would she last in a home where grief lived in every corner? She lasted because she wasn't afraid of sadness. She was afraid of something else. The twins noticed her before Ethan did. Lucas ran toward her like joy had a body and it was his. He threw his arms around her waist and said, too loudly for the hour, "Mimi's here!" "Mimi?" I'd asked the first time. Marisol had smiled, surprised by the nickname. "He chose it," she told me. "Lucas says my name is too long for his happy." Noah didn't hug. Noah watched. Noah studied the world like it was a painting only he could interpret. He lifted his notebook, angled it toward Marisol without speaking, and she leaned down, like she understood that this was his way of saying hello. On the page, a house with too many windows, and a woman drawn in the center, surrounded by tiny stars. Marisol's eyes flickered. "That's beautiful, Noah," she said softly. Noah tapped the stars 3 times with his pencil. Marisol mirrored him, 3 gentle taps against the edge of his notebook. A private ritual formed in seconds, so small I almost missed it. But the mansion didn't. Ethan watched that exchange like he'd witnessed a miracle and didn't know whether to believe in it. He cleared his throat. "Good morning," he said. Lucas spun. "Dad, Mimi made my toast with the smile face." Marisol spoke carefully, respectfully, like her voice was something she didn't want to disturb the house with. "Good morning, Mr. Marlowe." Ethan's eyes lingered on her longer than they should have, not in a way that was inappropriate, more in the way a drowning man notices the shore. "Thank you," he said, as if she'd done more than fix toast. The mansion had rules. Ethan had rules. His life was built on them. Contracts, numbers, protections. But grief doesn't follow rules, and neither does loneliness. I want you to understand something early, before the headlines, before the courtroom whispers, before the money started bleeding out of the walls. Ethan Marlowe wasn't searching for a replacement for Elena. He was searching for air, and Marisol, without trying, became oxygen. The first crack in the mansion's perfect armor came from a meeting held in a room that looked like it had been carved out of a bank vault. The boardroom. Long table, black glass, chairs that could have belonged to kings. On the far wall, a framed document with Elena's signature in delicate script. The Marlowe Family Trust. Ethan sat at the head, suit pressed, jaw tight. Across from him were 3 people who smiled like they'd been trained to do it. Gideon Crane, the trust administrator, Dr. Alana Kessler, a family advisor with a voice like ice, and Thomas Hargrove, legal counsel. Institutional villains don't always wear black. Sometimes they wear grey suits and call it responsibility. Mr. Marlowe, Gideon said, folding his hands, the trust requires continued stability. Ethan's nostrils flared. My children are stable. They are loved. They are safe. Dr. Kessler offered a sympathetic tilt of the head that made my skin crawl. Of course, no one is questioning your love. We're discussing your recent fluctuations. Fluctuations, Ethan repeated, bitter. You mean the market. Thomas slid a folder forward. You mean the withdrawals from non-trust accounts to cover private expenses that the trust does not authorize. Ethan's fingers tightened. My sons require specialized care. And you've had that, Gideon said smoothly. But the trust was designed to protect them long-term, not to be drained by impulsive decisions. Impulsive. A word that implied Ethan was reckless. A word that ignored the fact that grief made time feel like sand slipping through your hands. Ethan had been pouring money into therapy, art programs, sensory-friendly renovations, anything that might make the world gentler for Noah and Lucas. Yet the board sat there, guarding Elena's money like she was theirs. Here is our recommendation, Dr. Kessler said, voice soft. A temporary conservatorship review, just to ensure the best for the boys. The air changed. Ethan's gaze snapped up. You're threatening my custody. No, Thomas said quickly. We are suggesting oversight. With your emotional strain, Ethan stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. I have done everything for this family. Gideon didn't blink. Then you won't mind transparency. The boardroom smelled like leather and cold coffee. Outside, the mansion's garden swayed gently, indifferent. Inside, Ethan Marlowe's empire trembled at the idea that he could lose the only two people who made him feel alive. When we left that room, Ethan walked as if the floor might open beneath him. He passed Elena's portrait and didn't stop this time. He went straight to the kitchen, where Marisol was rinsing strawberries in a colander, humming something barely audible. Maybe a hymn, maybe a memory. Ethan leaned against the doorway like he'd run out of strength. Marisol looked up, instantly sensing the storm. Mr. Marlowe, he tried to speak. Nothing came. Lucas appeared at Ethan's side and grabbed his hand, pressing it to his own chest dramatically. Dad, your heart is loud, he declared, eyes huge. It's going boom-boom like thunder. Ethan's face cracked just slightly. Noah approached more slowly, holding his notebook. He lifted it to Ethan. A drawing. A man shaped like a mountain. Under the mountain, two small trees. Above them, a single sun fighting through clouds. Ethan swallowed hard. That's me? He asked. Noah nodded once. Marisol's voice came gentle. He's saying you're strong, she translated, even though Noah hadn't written words. Ethan looked at her like she'd just spoken a language he'd forgotten. I'm not, he whispered. So quietly I almost missed it. Marisol dried her hands, careful not to cross a line. You don't have to be strong every minute, she said. Sometimes you just have to stay. Ethan stared. And if staying isn't enough? Marisol hesitated. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small worn rosary, fingers brushing it like a habit. Then you pray, she said, not preachy, not loud, just honest. You pray for one more minute of strength, and you let love do the rest. Ethan Marlowe, the man who bought companies with a signature, stood in his kitchen and looked at a maid like she'd handed him a lifeline. That was the beginning. The kind of beginning that doesn't feel dangerous until it's too late. Because a mansion can hide many things, but it can't hide a heart that's waking up again. And when the Marlowe family trust realized Ethan was breathing without them, they tightened the rope. That night, I watched from the hallway as Ethan tucked Lucas into bed, listened to Lucas narrate his day with wild hand gestures, then sat beside Noah while Noah drew one last picture before sleep. Ethan's voice softened as he said, Good night, my boys. Lucas yawned. Good night, Dad. Good night, Mimi. Marisol stood at the doorway. She didn't step inside, but she smiled like she was holding back tears. Noah lifted his pencil and tapped it 3 times against his notebook. Marisol tapped 3 times on the doorframe in response. Ethan noticed. His eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in wonder. And somewhere deep in the mansion, behind locked cabinets and sealed documents, Elena's secret waited like a match near gasoline, because the next morning, a letter arrived with a court seal. And the first line read, Notice of Conservatorship Review. And Ethan Marlowe's hands started to shake. The first time the Marlowe mansion felt truly hostile wasn't during a thunderstorm or a security drill. It was the afternoon the lawyers began walking its halls like they owned the air, polished shoes on marble, low voices in corners, briefcases opening like mouths. Ethan tried to act like he didn't care. He wore the right suit, made the right calls, spoke in a voice that sounded steady. But when he thought no one was looking, he would stand at Elena's portrait and press his forehead to the frame, as if asking the dead for instructions. Marisol noticed everything, not because she was nosy, because survival taught her to read rooms before rooms read her. Her mother was sick back home, not a dramatic, cinematic illness, something slow, expensive, and relentless. Marisol had 2 younger siblings who still believed she was living a dream job in a beautiful house. She sent money every month and kept her fear folded neatly like linens. She couldn't afford to lose this job, and yet she was losing her heart. It started with mornings. Lucas insisted Marisol be the one to help him choose his brave shirt, the one with the little lion stitched on the pocket. Noah began leaving drawings on the kitchen counter where she always stood. Small things, quiet offerings. Then the private ritual expanded. 3 taps became a language. 3 taps meant, "Are you here?" 3 taps meant, "I saw you." 3 taps meant, "I'm scared." One evening, after the conservatorship letter, Marisol found Noah sitting alone in the sunroom, the one with tall windows that looked out onto the rose garden. Rain tapped softly at the glass. The room smelled like wet leaves and old books. Noah's shoulders were tight. His pencil hovered but didn't move. Marisol sat on the floor at a respectful distance, not forcing her presence into his space. "Hey," she whispered. Noah didn't look up. Marisol reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a sheet of colored paper. She folded it quickly, hands practiced. A paper crane. She held it out on her open palm. Noah's gaze flicked to it, then to her face, then back to the crane. Marisol tapped the floor 3 times. Noah's fingers twitched. He tapped his pencil 3 times, softer. Marisol set the crane beside him. "When I was little," she said, voice low, "my grandmother told me cranes carry prayers. You fold what you can't say. You let it fly." Noah's eyes blinked slowly, like he was letting that sink into his bones. Behind them, the mansion creaked, like it was listening. That night, Lucas barged into Marisol's small staff room, holding a stuffed fox. "Mimi, Foxy says you gotta come. Dad's doing the stare." "The stare?" Marisol asked. Lucas nodded solemnly, as if this was a medical diagnosis. "When Dad does the stare, he goes far away, but his body stays." Marisol's chest tightened. "Where is he?" Lucas grabbed her hand. "Library." The library was the heart of the mansion. 2 stories of dark wood, ladders on rails, books that smelled like dust and history. It had a fireplace that hadn't been lit in months, and a silence that felt judgmental. Ethan sat in a leather chair, papers spread on the table like a battlefield. His tie was loosened. His eyes were hollow. Lucas climbed into the chair beside him, wedging himself like a warm comma in a sentence that was too heavy. "Hi, Dad," Lucas said brightly. "I'm here now." Ethan blinked as if waking from underwater. "Hey, buddy." Lucas leaned closer. "You're thinking loud again." Ethan tried to smile. It broke halfway. "Yeah," he admitted. "I am." Marisol stood near the doorway, unsure whether she had permission to enter this grief. Ethan looked up and saw her. For a second, something like shame flashed across his face, like he didn't want her to witness his collapse. But then his voice came out raw. "Marisol, could you—" He stopped, swallowed. "Could you bring some tea?" "Yes," she said immediately. As she moved toward the side table, Noah appeared silently behind her. He carried his notebook like a shield. He walked straight to Ethan and placed the notebook on the table. Ethan's fingers trembled as he turned it. A drawing of a lock. A drawing of a key, then Elena's portrait, and beneath it a small symbol, 3 stars. Ethan frowned. "Noah, what is this?" Noah pointed toward the gallery wall. Lucas bounced. Noah found secret stars, like treasure. Ethan's brow furrowed deeper. "What stars?" Noah tapped his pencil 3 times against the notebook. Harder now. Urgent. Marisol froze, tray in her hands. Something about that symbol tugged at her memory. 3 stars. She'd seen them. But where? A flashback hit her without warning. Her first week at the mansion, cleaning the gallery after midnight, because the trust people wanted everything spotless before a review. She remembered dusting the frame of Elena's portrait, her rag catching slightly on a tiny raised mark. 3 small stars etched into the wood. Marisol's throat went dry. Ethan stood abruptly, almost knocking the chair back. "Show me." They went to the gallery. The mansion's hallway lights were dim, casting Elena's painted eyes in shadow. Ethan lifted the portrait carefully. Behind it, hidden on the wall, was a small safe, so seamlessly built into the paneling you'd never notice unless you knew where to look. Ethan stared like the wall had just confessed. "No," he whispered. "Elena, what did you do?" His hands shook as he typed in old codes, birthdays, anniversaries. Nothing. The safe beeped red. Lucas pressed his palms to the wall dramatically. "Open, open, open!" Noah reached up and touched the safe, then touched his own chest, then touched Ethan's wrist. A plea without words. "Trust me." Ethan exhaled shakily. "Okay," he said. "Okay, Noah. Tell me." Noah pointed to Elena's portrait, specifically the necklace painted around her neck. It held a small pendant shaped like a rose. Marisol inhaled sharply. Elena used to wear that pendant in photos. Everyone knew it. Ethan's face tightened. He reached beneath his shirt and pulled out a chain he'd worn since Elena's death. The pendant. He hadn't taken it off once. His fingers fumbled as he unclasped it. He held it up. "This." Noah nodded vigorously. Marisol whispered, "Try it." Ethan's hands trembled as he pressed the pendant against the safe door. A soft click. The panel opened like a sigh. Inside was a slim folder and a small velvet pouch. Ethan pulled out the folder first. His eyes scanned the top page, and his face drained of color. "What is it?" Marisol asked, barely able to breathe. Ethan's voice cracked. "It's Elena's letter, a sealed directive." He flipped the page with shaking fingers. More documents, more signatures, and then he saw it. A clause, a hidden clause inside the trust. A clause that didn't just protect the boys, it protected Ethan from the trust. A contingency if the board overreached. A contingency that would transfer control, temporarily, to a guardian of Elena's choosing. Ethan swallowed hard reading the name. Marisol's heart slammed. He looked up slowly. "Marisol Reyes." The hallway seemed to tilt. Lucas gasped like it was the best surprise ever. "Mimi's famous." Marisol stumbled back. "No, that's not... I've never..." Ethan's voice was hoarse. "Elena chose you." Marisol's mind raced. How? Why? She had never met Elena. She had only been hired recently. This made no sense. Unless Elena had planned for someone who would love the boys without loving the money. Marisol's fingers reached for the velvet pouch with trembling caution. Inside was a small ring, simple, gold, worn at the edges. Ethan stared at it like it was radioactive. "That's," he whispered, "that's our first ring. Before the diamonds, before the headlines." Marisol shook her head, tears threatening. "Mr. Marlowe, I don't understand." Ethan looked at Elena's portrait, then back at Marisol. "Neither do I." And that's when Gideon Crane's voice drifted down the hall, too close, too calm. "Mr. Marlowe, are you there?" Ethan's body went rigid. Marisol snapped the safe closed and lowered the portrait back into place so quickly the frame bumped the wall. Noah's eyes were wide. Lucas clamped a hand over his own mouth dramatically, like he understood the concept of secrecy at last. Gideon turned the corner, carrying a tablet. His gaze flicked from Ethan to Marisol to the boys. "Ah," he said, smile smooth. "Family time." Ethan's jaw clenched. "What do you want?" Gideon's eyes lingered on Marisol a beat too long. "Just a reminder, the review hearing is scheduled sooner than we expected. Tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow." Ethan's face tightened. "That's impossible." "Not when the court is concerned," Gideon replied. "We want what's best for the children." Marisol felt the words like a knife wrapped in velvet. Gideon offered a polite nod to the boys. "Good night, gentlemen." Lucas waved. "Good night, Mr. Grumpy." Gideon's smile twitched. Noah didn't move. He only tapped his pencil against his leg 3 times. Fast, panicked. Marisol mirrored the taps lightly against her thigh, hidden by her apron. "I'm here. I saw you. I'm scared too." When Gideon walked away, Ethan's shoulders sagged like a building losing its foundation. Marisol whispered, You need to show the court Elena's directive. Ethan shook his head, eyes haunted. If the board learns Elena left a loophole, they'll attack it. They'll destroy you. Marisol's voice came steady despite her fear. Then we don't give them time. Ethan stared at her. You don't understand the kind of people they are. Marisol's eyes flashed with something old and hard. Mr. Marlowe, I grew up learning how to survive systems that don't care if you're good. I understand. Noah stepped forward and pressed the paper crane into Ethan's palm. Ethan stared at it, confused. Lucas declared, It's a prayer bird. Mimi says it carries stuff you can't say. Ethan's throat bobbed. He held the crane like it was fragile hope. Marisol's voice softened. Let it carry you tonight, she said. Ethan exhaled shakily. Marisol, why would Elena choose you? Marisol swallowed, memories flickering. An old church, a woman's voice, her grandmother's warning that some doors only open when love is tested. I don't know, she admitted, but I know this. She loved those boys enough to plan for their worst day. Ethan's eyes glistened. Tomorrow might be ours. Marisol nodded, fear and faith braided together. Then tonight, we fight in silence. They moved back to the library. Ethan gathered papers with frantic precision. Marisol sat with Noah and Lucas folding cranes, letting the rhythm calm the boys' anxious bodies. Noah drew stars on each crane. Lucas named each one like a pet. This one is Captain Hope. This one is Sir Don't Cry. This one is Mommy's Wind. Ethan watched them, and for the first time in weeks, I saw his face soften, not because the world was safe, but because he wasn't alone inside the danger anymore. Outside, the rain strengthened. Inside, Eleanor's hidden letter waited on the table like a flame. And Ethan Marlowe didn't yet realize the most dangerous part wasn't losing money. It was loving the wrong person in the eyes of the system. Because tomorrow the trust would see Marisol's name, and they would decide she wasn't a guardian, she was a threat. The courtroom didn't feel like justice. It felt like theater. Wood-paneled walls, a seal on the wall like a stamp of authority, and rows of seats where strangers watched a family's pain like it was entertainment. Ethan stood beside his attorney, perfectly dressed, perfectly controlled, but I could see it in his hands. A faint tremor he couldn't hide. Marisol sat behind him, not at his side. Not yet. The system hadn't decided what she was allowed to be. Noah and Lucas weren't there. Children didn't belong in that room. They were safe at home with staff and security, in their wing filled with soft rugs and familiar smells, vanilla lotion, crayons, and the faint scent of Elena's old sweater that Ethan refused to pack away. Gideon Crane sat across the aisle, calm as a man ordering lunch. Doctor. Kessler leaned in close, whispering like she was already writing the narrative. Unstable father, vulnerable children, necessary oversight. The judge began with formalities, but the heart of it came quickly. Mr. Marlowe, the judge said, voice neutral, the petition suggests concerns regarding your management of funds and your emotional capacity since the passing of your wife. Ethan's jaw tightened. With respect, my wife's death does not make me unfit. The trust attorney rose. No one is claiming unfitness. We're requesting structured oversight to protect the children's future. Oversight. The word again. Ethan's lawyer began to argue numbers and intent. Ethan wanted to speak of love, of bedtime stories and therapy sessions, of Lucas's laughter and Noah's quiet brilliance. But love wasn't a spreadsheet. Then Ethan's attorney slid Elena's directive into evidence. Gideon's eyes narrowed. Dr. Kessler's lips parted, just slightly. The trust attorney read the name aloud as if tasting it. Marisol Reyes. The room shifted. I watched Gideon tilt his head, calculating. Marisol's stomach dropped as every gaze turned toward her. Some curious, some skeptical, some hungry. The judge looked over his glasses. Ms. Reyes, please stand. Marisol rose slowly, knees threatening to buckle. She kept her face composed, the way women learn to do when fear might cost them everything. Do you know why Mrs. Marlowe named you as a contingency guardian? The judge asked. Marisol's throat went tight. Honesty was the only thing she had. No, Your Honor, she said. I never met Mrs. Marlowe. I was hired months after her passing. Murmurs. Gideon leaned toward the trust attorney, whispering sharply. The judge's brow furrowed. Then why do you believe she did? Marisol swallowed, forcing her voice steady. Because she wanted someone who would choose the boys over the money, she said quietly. Someone outside the trust. The trust attorney scoffed. Or someone easily manipulated, a household employee with no legal training, no financial experience. Ethan's control snapped. "Stop!" he barked, louder than he meant. He steadied himself. "She cares for my children with more patience than anyone I've seen since Elena died." Dr. Kessler's voice slid in, syrupy. "Mr. Marlowe, grief can create attachments that feel helpful but are actually destabilizing." Destabilizing. Marisol felt anger rise like heat behind her eyes, but she held it down. Not here. Not like this. The hearing ended with a temporary decision, a short-term financial freeze until further review, plus increased reporting requirements. Temporary, they said, as if temporary couldn't kill a business. Ethan walked out of the courtroom looking like the walls had stolen his oxygen. Outside, cameras waited. The headlines wrote themselves. Billionaire losing control. Maid named in secret trust clause. Court questions. Stability. By nightfall, Ethan's accounts were tangled in restrictions. Deals paused. Investors panicked. His flagship company's stock dipped hard enough to make the boardroom smell like blood without a drop being spilled. Money doesn't vanish in a day. Confidence does. Back at the mansion, Ethan retreated into the study like a man walking into a storm cellar. Marisol found Noah and Lucas in the playroom. Lucas was building a tower too high for gravity. Noah drew quietly, his brow furrowed. Lucas looked up when Marisol entered and immediately sensed the heaviness. His voice dropped to a whisper, as if loudness might break something. "Did they take Dad away?" Marisol crossed the room and knelt to his level. "No, sweetheart. Dad's here." Lucas stared, eyes shining. But his face, "Is it gone again?" Marisol's heart twisted. "Not gone," she said gently. "Just tired." Noah slid a page toward her. A drawing of a man standing on a cliff, wind pushing against him. Below the cliff, waves made of numbers. Marisol's throat tightened. "You're worried," she whispered. Noah tapped 3 times. Slow. Marisol tapped back. "I'm here." That night, in the kitchen where the light was warm and the marble counters looked like frozen rivers, Ethan sat with his head in his hands. Papers were spread around him like fallen leaves. His phone buzzed with messages he couldn't answer. Marisol poured tea and placed it in front of him. He didn't look up. "I'm going to lose everything," he whispered. Marisol pulled out a chair and sat, careful, respectful, but refusing to abandon him. "Everything?" she asked softly. Ethan let out a broken laugh. "The company, the deals, the trust is squeezing my liquidity. They know exactly where to press." Marisol's eyes flicked to the folder, the one from Elena's safe, now locked in Ethan's desk. "The directive was supposed to protect you." "It protected them," Ethan said, voice bitter. "It made you a target." Marisol's chest rose with a sharp breath. "Why do you think they're doing this now?" Ethan looked up at last, eyes red. "Because I'm weak. Because Elena isn't here to stop them. Because they can." Marisol's voice lowered. "Or because Elena left something else, something that scares them." Ethan stared. "What are you talking about?" Marisol hesitated, then told him about the 3 stars she'd noticed on the portrait frame weeks earlier, about how Eleanor's safe felt too deliberate to contain only 1 letter. Ethan's hands trembled. "There was more." Marisol nodded. "Maybe. The safe had room. The pouch, the ring, the letter. But Eleanor, she planned. She wouldn't leave only 1 tool." Ethan's eyes darted toward the hallway, toward the portrait. "If there's more, we need it." From the doorway, Lucas appeared with his stuffed fox. He climbed onto Ethan's lap without asking permission, as if declaring that love didn't require paperwork. Ethan stiffened, then melted, arms wrapping around his son like instinct. Lucas pressed his forehead against Ethan's chest. "Dad," Lucas whispered, voice suddenly small. "Don't go away." Ethan's breath hitched. "I'm here," he said, but it sounded like a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. Noah stepped in quietly, holding his notebook. He approached Ethan and placed the notebook on his knee. Ethan turned the page, a drawing of a key again, but this time the key had a number, and beside the number, a shape, like a tiny clock. Ethan frowned. "What is that?" Noah pointed, then pointed toward the grandfather clock in the foyer. Marisol felt chills. The clock was an antique, Elena's favorite. She used to say it sounded like a heartbeat. Ethan stood slowly, Lucas still holding on. "Okay," Ethan whispered. "Okay." They walked to the foyer. The mansion's ceiling rose high above them like a cathedral. The grandfather clock stood tall and elegant, ticking with quiet authority. Noah approached it, calm now, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. He tapped the wood 3 times. Marisol tapped her fingers together 3 times unconsciously, heart pounding. Ethan crouched and examined the base. His fingers found a small latch hidden beneath the carved trim. He pulled. A narrow compartment slid open. Inside, a ledger. Ethan's eyes widened. "Elena." He opened it with shaking hands. Pages filled with neat handwriting, numbers, names, dates. Not the trust's polished reports. The raw truth. Marisol leaned closer. She saw a recurring name. Gideon Crane. Transfer after transfer. Fees. Administrative adjustments. Offshore routing codes. Ethan's face went pale. "He's been stealing," he whispered. Marisol's voice was steady, but her hands shook. "Not just stealing. Hiding it inside the system so it looks legal." Ethan's breath came fast. This explains the fluctuations. It wasn't me. It was them." Lucas tilted his head. "Bad numbers?" he asked. Ethan looked at his son, eyes shining with tears. "Yes," he whispered. "Bad numbers." Noah, watching closely, pointed to a final page. A note in Elena's handwriting, addressed to Ethan. Ethan read silently. Then his lips moved as he whispered the words, "If they come for you, follow the stars. Trust the one who stays when you break." Ethan's gaze lifted slowly to Marisol. Something in him cracked open fully. He stood there, billionaire, father, man drowning, and for the first time he didn't try to hide how much he needed someone. But before Ethan could speak, the house alarm chimed softly. Not the siren, just the internal alert. A security guard's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Marlowe, we have visitors at the gate. Gideon Crane and legal counsel. They say it's urgent." Marisol's stomach dropped. Ethan clutched the ledger like it was a weapon made of paper. Gideon was coming, and now Ethan had proof. Proof that could save him, or destroy them all, if Gideon realized what was in Ethan's hands. Ethan looked at Marisol, voice trembling. "What do we do?" Marisol's eyes flashed with fear and faith colliding. "We protect the ledger," she said, "and we don't let them touch the boys." Noah tapped his pencil 3 times, fast, sharp. Lucas hugged Ethan tighter, whispering, "We're your brave shirts, Dad." Ethan closed his eyes, swallowing a sob, and then he said the words I never expected a man like him to say. "Marisol, I don't know how to do this without you." And Gideon Crane's footsteps echoed in the foyer like a countdown. Gideon Crane entered the mansion like he was walking into his own office, calm, entitled, and smiling too smoothly. 2 attorneys trailed him, their eyes scanning the decor like they were assessing assets, not a home. Ethan stood in the foyer with the ledger hidden inside his suit jacket. Marisol stood a half step behind him, steady as a spine. Noah and Lucas were not present. They were safe upstairs in their wing with security stationed at the hall. The mansion's rules had changed. Love didn't mean open doors anymore. Gideon's gaze flicked around. "Mr. Marlowe," he said warmly, "we're concerned." Ethan's voice came flat. "Concerned about what?" Gideon's smile widened. "The market's response. Investors are spooked. The trust would like to assist." Assist. The word felt like a hand reaching for someone's throat. Ethan replied, "And how would you assist?" One of the attorneys stepped forward. "We're requesting immediate access to financial records and certain personal documents to stabilize the trust's position." Marisol felt Ethan's body tense beside her. The ledger pressed against his ribs like a heartbeat. Gideon's eyes slid to Marisol. "Ms. Reyes," he said, voice polite, "it seems you've become quite influential." Marisol kept her chin level. "I'm an employee." "Are you?" Gideon asked softly. "Or are you something else now?" Ethan snapped. "Leave her out of this." Gideon's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Marlowe, with respect, your decisions have consequences. The court is watching. Your household is under scrutiny." Ethan's jaw clenched. "My children are not a business negotiation." Gideon sighed, as if Ethan was being emotional and therefore inconvenient. "Then let's keep it professional. We will conduct an internal audit tonight." "Tonight?" Ethan repeated. "Time is of the essence," Gideon said. "We have authority." Marisol felt the trap tightening. If Gideon got access to Ethan's office, to Elena's hidden spaces, to the clock compartment, the ledger would vanish. She leaned closer to Ethan, whispering, "We need to move it. Now." Ethan's eyes flicked toward the library, then back. Where? Marisol's mind raced. The mansion had places for valuables, but Gideon knew those places. Then Noah's voice, silent voice, drawn voice, floated into her memory. 3 stars. Follow the stars. She remembered the garden. Elena's rose garden wasn't just pretty, it was structured. Paths lined with stone, a fountain, a small greenhouse tucked at the back, where Elena used to keep delicate seedlings. The greenhouse. The trust men rarely went outside. Marisol whispered, "The greenhouse." Ethan's eyes widened, understanding. He straightened. "Gideon," he said, forcing calm, "if you want cooperation, you'll wait. I will not allow an audit without my attorney present. He's on his way." Gideon's smile thinned. "That's not necessary." "It is," Ethan said. "Or I call the judge and report harassment." Gideon studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded, as if conceding. "Very well. 1 hour." As Gideon and his team moved to the sitting room, Ethan turned slightly, eyes burning. "Marisol," he murmured, "go." Marisol nodded once and moved quickly, but not running, not dramatic, just purposeful. She climbed the servants' staircase, breath steady, and reached the twins' wing. Security stood by the hallway. "Ms. Reyes," one guard said, "everything okay?" Marisol forced a small smile. "Yes. Keep them safe. No one enters." Inside the playroom, Lucas was pacing with his stuffed fox like a tiny general. Noah sat at the table, pencil poised, eyes intense. Lucas spotted Marisol and rushed her. "Mimi, the house feels mad." Marisol knelt, cupping his cheeks. "Listen to me, brave boy. You and Noah stay here. You don't leave this wing, okay?" Lucas's lower lip trembled. "Is Dad gonna disappear?" Marisol pressed her forehead to his. "No, not if we hold him." Noah watched, then tapped his pencil 3 times, slow and deliberate. Marisol tapped back. "I'm here." She stood and hurried down again, heart pounding. Ethan met her at the back corridor near the pantry, where cameras didn't cover every inch. He pulled the ledger from his jacket and handed it to her like he was handing over his lungs. Marisol swallowed. "I'll hide it." Ethan's voice cracked. "Be careful." Marisol nodded. "I will." She moved through the kitchen and out the back door into the garden. The air smelled like wet earth and roses. Clouds had thickened, the sky bruising into evening. The fountain burbled softly, as if refusing to panic. Marisol reached the greenhouse. Inside, it was warm and humid, smelling of soil and green life. Glass panes collected raindrops. Rows of plants lined wooden shelves, some thriving, some fragile. Marisol's hands trembled as she searched for a hiding place. Her eyes fell on a large ceramic pot at the back, an old one with Elena's initials carved faintly into the base. She knelt, lifted the pot carefully, and dug beneath it with her fingers, the soil cool and damp. The ledger slid into the earth like a secret returning home. She covered it again, replaced the pot, wiped her hands on her apron. Then she heard the greenhouse door creak. Marisol froze. Gideon Crane stood in the doorway, raincoat crisp, eyes gleaming. "So this is where you went," he said softly. Marisol's blood ran cold. "I came to check the plants," she lied, voice steady. Gideon stepped closer, the greenhouse glass reflecting his face in fractured pieces. "A maid who checks plants during an audit threat?" he murmured. "You're either very devoted or very stupid." Marisol lifted her chin. "What do you want?" Gideon's smile vanished. "I want what you took." Marisol's stomach dropped. He knew. Somehow he knew. "I didn't take anything," she said. Gideon's voice sharpened. "Don't insult me. Elena didn't name a random employee as a contingency guardian without leaving something behind. And now Ethan is acting braver than he should. That means you found it." Marisol's mind raced. "Stall. Protect the boys, protect Ethan, protect the ledger." Gideon stepped closer, and for the first time, his calm cracked enough to show the hunger underneath. "You don't belong in this story, Ms. Reyes. People like you don't get to rewrite legacies." Marisol's voice shook slightly, but she stood firm. "Elena did. She wrote me in." Gideon's eyes narrowed. "Then she made a mistake." He reached for her arm. Marisol stepped back quickly, heart hammering. She bumped a shelf. Pots rattled. A small watering can tipped, spilling water onto the greenhouse floor. It splashed across a power strip near a heat lamp. A soft pop. The lights flickered. Marisol's breath caught. Not panic, but immediate focus. She knew the rules. No chaos, no danger, fix it. She moved fast, not dramatic, not reckless, just responsive. She yanked the plug free, cut the power safely, and grabbed a towel to mop up water. Gideon scoffed. Always cleaning, even now. Marisol kept her voice controlled. This greenhouse isn't the battlefield you want. Gideon stepped forward again, angrier now. Tell me where it is. Marisol's heart pounded. Then, through the glass, she saw movement in the garden path. Two small figures, Noah and Lucas. Her chest seized. They were not supposed to leave the wing. They were safe. Security should have stopped them. But children, even protected, find cracks when fear is bigger than rules. Lucas pressed his palms to the greenhouse glass, face wet. Not with rain, but tears. Noah stood beside him, notebook clutched tight. Marisol's breath caught. No, she whispered, horror rising. Not at danger, but at the thought of them seeing this, feeling this. Gideon turned slowly, his gaze landing on the boys. His expression shifted, calculating again. Ah, he murmured. The leverage walks in on its own. Marisol's entire body went cold. Don't you... Lucas's voice came muffled through the glass, but clear in its desperation. Mimi, Dad is crying loud. Noah lifted his notebook to the glass. A drawing. Ethan on his knees. Marisol's throat tightened. Ethan. He was breaking. Gideon smiled. You see? Everything is connected. Marisol moved toward the door, but Gideon blocked her path. You'll stay, he said quietly, and you'll hand over whatever you found. Marisol's hands shook. Her mind flashed to her grandmother's voice. Faith isn't the absence of fear. Faith is what you do with it. She closed her eyes for half a second, fingers brushing the rosary in her pocket, a silent prayer forming without words. God, don't let me fail these children. Then she opened her eyes and spoke with calm force. Gideon, she said, if you touch those boys with your schemes, I will scream loud enough for every guard to hear, and your concerned trust administrator mask will crack in public. Gideon's eyes hardened. You think anyone will believe you? Marisol's voice lowered. I think Eleanor believed me, and that scares you. Gideon's jaw tightened. He reached into his coat and pulled out a document folder. Here's what's going to happen. You sign a statement that you misrepresented the directive. That you coerced Mr. Marlowe. You resign quietly and you disappear. Marisol stared, rage and fear battling. No. Gideon leaned in, voice a hiss. Then your mother's hospital bills. How are you paying them when you're unemployed? When your agency blacklists you? When every outlet calls you a gold digger who manipulated a grieving billionaire? Marisol flinched. He had investigated her. Of course he had. The system always does. Outside, Lucas banged the glass gently, like knocking on heaven. Mimi, 3 taps. Noah tapped his pencil against the notebook. 3 taps visible through the glass. Marisol swallowed tears. 3 taps. I'm here. I saw you. I'm scared too. She tapped her fingers against her thigh. 3 times, where only Noah could see. Noah's face softened just slightly. And then Noah did something he almost never did. He opened the greenhouse door a crack. Security behind them now, finally catching up, calling softly, trying not to spook them. Noah stepped forward with his notebook held up like evidence. He looked directly at Gideon Crane, and he spoke. 2 words, quiet but clear, as if pulled from a place deeper than fear. Stop! Liar! The air shattered. Gideon froze, stunned, not because a child spoke, but because the room felt like it had chosen sides. Lucas stepped in beside Noah, chin lifted, voice trembling but brave. We don't like you, he declared. You make Dad's heart hurt. Gideon recovered quickly, his expression snapping back into control. Children, he said, patronizing. Go back inside. Noah lifted the notebook again. On the page, 3 stars, a clock, a man with a snake smile, and a big X over the snake. Marisol's eyes widened. Noah had drawn Gideon. He had been watching longer than anyone realized. Security arrived at the greenhouse door, 2 guards stepping in. Ms. Reyes? One asked, alarmed. We told the boys not to... Marisol snapped. Take them back now, calmly, safely. The guards nodded, guiding the boys gently away, promising them Dad was okay, that Mimi was okay. Lucas called back, voice cracking. Mimi, don't disappear! Marisol's throat burned. "I won't," she whispered. But Gideon smiled again, now colder. "So," he murmured, "you have witnesses." Marisol's eyes flashed. "No, I have children who can see truth." Gideon stepped back, straightening his coat. "Enjoy your little victory," he said, "because Ethan Marlowe is breaking right now, and when he breaks, he'll sign anything." Marisol's chest tightened. She rushed out of the greenhouse, leaving Gideon behind, and ran, not recklessly, not blindly, but fast enough that her breath tore. She entered the mansion through the back corridor and found the sound first, a low, broken sob. It came from the library. Ethan was there, alone, on his knees beside the table, papers scattered like snow. His suit jacket was off, tie discarded. His hands pressed to his face as if trying to hold himself together. "Ethan," Marisol whispered. He looked up, eyes wild with shame. "They froze everything," he choked out. "My CFO says if investors pull out, if the banks call loans, I can't cover payroll, I can't keep the company alive." Marisol approached slowly. "We have proof," she said. Elena left a ledger. Ethan's face contorted. "Proof doesn't matter if I'm destroyed before it's heard." Marisol knelt beside him, keeping her voice steady. "Listen to me, the truth matters, the boys matter, you matter." Ethan laughed bitterly. "I'm just money to them." Marisol's eyes filled. "Then stop trying to fight them with money." Ethan's breath shook. "What do I fight them with?" Marisol's voice broke on the answer. "With your heart. With courage. With the love Eleanor trusted." Ethan stared, tears spilling now, unguarded. And then something astonishing happened. Ethan Marlowe, the man who never begged, reached for Marisol's hand and pressed it to his forehead. He bowed, shoulders shaking. He was kneeling. He whispered, broken and honest, "I can't do this without you. Please, don't leave." Marisol's tears fell. She didn't pull away. She held his hand tighter, grounding him. In the doorway, unseen by Ethan, Noah and Lucas stood with a guard, safe, supervised, watching quietly. Lucas whispered, "Dad's on the floor." Noah held his notebook, eyes wet. Marisol lifted Ethan's chin gently. "I'm not leaving," she said, "but you have to stand up for them." Ethan inhaled shakily. He looked past her, saw the boys, and his face collapsed into a sob that sounded like years. Lucas rushed forward, safe and guided, and hugged his father's shoulder. "Dad, we got you," he said with fierce tenderness. "Wear your brave shirts." Noah stepped closer and placed the paper crane in Ethan's palm again. Ethan stared at it, then at Noah. "You found it," he whispered. "You saved me." Noah didn't smile. He just tapped Ethan's hand 3 times, and Ethan, through tears, tapped back, clumsy, learning, but trying. "I'm here. I saw you. I'm scared too." And in that small ritual, a billionaire father stopped being an empire and became a man who could be held. But upstairs in the sitting room, Gideon Crane was already calling someone. And the next move he made would be the one that could end everything. He would claim Marisol wasn't a guardian. He would claim she was a wife in disguise. And he would try to turn love into a weapon. By morning, the mansion felt like it was under siege, not with soldiers, but with narratives. A gossip site posted a headline implying Marisol had planned her way into the Marlowe fortune. An investor email leaked. A bank requested an emergency meeting. Gideon Crane's machine worked fast, the way institutions do when they sense a crack in their control. Ethan looked like he hadn't slept. He stood at the kitchen island staring at the ledger pages Marisol had copied by hand the night before, because the original remained buried in the greenhouse, safe in the earth, waiting for the right moment. Noah and Lucas ate breakfast quietly. Lucas tried to make jokes, but the jokes fell flat. Noah drew stars over and over, like he was reinforcing a map. Marisol stood by the sink, fingers tight around her rosary. Faith wasn't comfort today. Faith was a choice made in trembling. Ethan finally said, voice rough, "They're calling you a con artist." Marisol didn't look up. "They can call me whatever they want. They're calling my love to stupidity," Ethan whispered. Marisol turned then, eyes shining. "Do you love me, Ethan?" He froze at the simplicity. The truth. He swallowed. "I don't know what love is anymore," he admitted. "After Elena, everything felt like ash." Marisol stepped closer. "Then don't name it yet," she said softly. "Just choose what's right. Choose the boys. Choose the truth." Ethan's eyes filled. "If I choose you, they'll come harder." Marisol nodded. Then we stand stronger. The plan was simple, not reckless. Ethan's attorney would file an emergency motion using the ledger evidence, requesting an independent forensic audit and immediate suspension of Gideon's authority. A public move because secrecy was Gideon's weapon, but the system moves slowly when the powerful want it to. By afternoon, Gideon arrived again, this time with official-looking paperwork and a court officer. Not police, not a raid, just enough authority to make people tremble. The officer stood in the foyer, polite but firm. "Mr. Marlowe, there's an order for limited access to certain financial records for trust compliance." Ethan's jaw tightened. "This is harassment." Gideon smiled. "It's procedure." Marisol's heart pounded as she watched Gideon's eyes scan the mansion, toward the library, toward the gallery, toward any place secrets might hide. Noah and Lucas were upstairs, safe, with staff and security, engaged in calm activities. No chaos, no children in the middle of adult warfare. Ethan turned to Marisol, voice low. "If they find the ledger, they won't," Marisol said, steady. "Not today." Gideon moved toward the library like a shark toward blood. Ethan stepped in front of him. "No." Gideon's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Marlowe," he said softly, "don't make this harder. Sign the voluntary compliance form. Admit you were emotionally compromised. Admit Ms. Reyes influenced you. The court will appreciate your honesty." Ethan stared at the pen like it was a knife. Marisol felt a flash of fear so sharp it made her dizzy. This was the moment Gideon wanted. Ethan surrendering. Ethan's hand hovered. Then Lucas's voice floated down the stairs. Safe from the landing, supervised by a guard. "Dad," Lucas called, voice small. Ethan turned quickly. "Lucas, stay upstairs, buddy." Lucas didn't move closer. He just stood where he was allowed to stand, clutching his fox. "Dad," he said, voice trembling, "your heart is crying again." Silence filled the foyer. Noah appeared beside Lucas, held back gently by the guard's hand on his shoulder. Noah lifted his notebook. A drawing. Ethan standing tall. A paper crane on his shoulder, 2 boys holding his hands, and a bright sun. Ethan's breath hitched. Gideon muttered, "This is inappropriate." Ethan's eyes snapped to him. "No," he said, voice suddenly firm. "What's inappropriate is you using my children's future as your personal bank." Gideon's smile faltered. "Careful." Ethan stepped back from the pen. "I'm not signing anything." The court officer shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Marlowe, refusal could complicate—" Ethan lifted a hand. "I understand," he said, "but I'm done being bullied." Gideon's eyes hardened. "Then you leave me no choice." He turned to the officer. "Proceed." The officer gestured toward the library. 2 auditors began moving, calm, professional. Marisol's mind raced. They might not find the ledger, but they could find Elena's safe, the directive, the ring, anything to twist. Marisol leaned toward Ethan. "We go public now." Ethan's eyes widened. "Now." Marisol nodded. "Now. Before they rewrite the story." Ethan swallowed, then pulled out his phone with shaking hands and dialed his attorney on speaker. "File it," Ethan said, voice loud enough for Gideon to hear. "Emergency motion, forensic audit request, suspension petition, all of it." Gideon's face tightened. "You're making a mistake." Ethan's eyes burned. "Elena didn't marry me because I was careful. She married me because I was brave." Gideon scoffed. "And now you're brave because your maid told you to be?" Ethan flinched, then looked at Marisol, and something inside him changed. He turned back to Gideon and said the words that flipped the entire power dynamic. "She's not my maid." Gideon froze. Ethan's voice shook, but it didn't break. "She's the person who stayed when I collapsed. She's the person my children trust. She's the person Elena chose when she couldn't be here." Gideon's mouth tightened. "Don't be ridiculous." Ethan stepped forward, eyes wet, voice fierce. "I'm marrying her." The foyer went silent. The court officer looked startled. The auditors paused. Even the mansion felt like it leaned in. Marisol's breath left her body. Ethan turned to her, and in his eyes was fear. Yes, but also devotion. The kind born from a man choosing love over reputation. "I'm not doing this as a headline," Ethan said softly to her. "I'm doing it because I can't lose what's real." Marisol's hands trembled. "They'll destroy you for this." Ethan swallowed hard. "Then let them try." Gideon recovered, anger flashing. You're confirming every suspicion, he spat. A grieving billionaire manipulated by a staff member, Ethan's voice thundered. No. He turned, and for the second time in days he did something that made the room forget money existed. He walked to Marisol, in front of everyone, and he dropped to his knees. Not to beg this time, not from weakness, but from truth. He took her hand, pressed it to his chest and said, loud enough for the system to hear, Marisol Reyes saved my son's father. She saved my home. She saved me. And I will not let you turn her into a villain because you're afraid of what she represents. Marisol's tears fell freely. She knelt too, meeting him where he was, forehead touching his. In the quiet, Noah's voice, soft, careful, rose from the stair landing. It wasn't loud, but it landed like a bell. Dad, stand. Ethan's breath hitched. He looked up. Noah stared with fierce calm, then pointed to Ethan's heart, and Noah said, halting but clear, brave. Lucas burst into tears, the emotional anchor cracking open. See? Lucas cried. Dad is brave. Mimi is brave. We're brave shirts. Even Gideon looked rattled for half a second. But institutions don't stop because a child speaks. Gideon's face hardened. Proceed, he snapped at the auditors. Take what you need. Ethan rose slowly, wiping his face. He looked at the court officer. How you want records? Ethan said calmly. You'll get them, but you'll also get this. He turned to Marisol. It's time. Marisol nodded and left the foyer, moving with quiet speed through the garden to the greenhouse. She dug with trembling hands, pulled the ledger from the earth, wiped it clean. She carried it back into the mansion like a sacred object. When she returned, the auditors were opening drawers, scanning shelves, touching Elena's world like it was inventory. Marisol walked straight to the table in the library and placed the ledger down with a soft thud. Gideon's eyes widened for the first time with real panic. Ethan's attorney arrived minutes later, breathless, and took one look at the ledger. Oh my God, he whispered. Ethan's voice was calm now, steady like a man who had finally found ground. That ledger, Ethan said, is proof of misappropriation, concealment, and breach of fiduciary duty. The court officer swallowed. Mr. Crane, what is this? Gideon's mask cracked. It's fabricated, he snapped. Ethan's attorney flipped pages, pointing to signatures, transfers, patterns. This is consistent, he said sharply, and it aligns with missing funds. Gideon stepped forward, voice rising. You can't, this is privileged, this is… Ethan cut him off. No, Ethan said quietly. This is Elena. The room was still. Then the officer spoke, firm now. Mr. Crane, we need to pause this inspection. I'm contacting the court for instructions. You may be subject to further review. Gideon's eyes flashed with rage, but he forced himself into a smile. Of course, he said, voice too tight. Procedure. As he turned to leave, his gaze landed on Marisol with pure hatred. This isn't over, he murmured. Marisol met his stare. It is, she said softly, because the truth finally has a voice. He left, and with him, some of the mansion's suffocating weight lifted just slightly, like a window cracked open after years of stale air. That evening, Ethan took the twins into the garden. The sun broke through clouds in a way that felt like a blessing. The rose bushes glowed. The fountains sparkled. The mansion watched from behind them, silent and proud. Ethan sat on a bench, one twin on each side. Marisol stood nearby, not hovering, just present. Lucas leaned into Ethan and said, voice small now, tired from big emotions, Dad, are you still here? Ethan kissed his forehead. I'm here, he whispered. I'm not going away. Noah lifted his notebook and showed Ethan a new drawing. A heart. Inside the heart, a tiny clock. Ethan frowned gently. What's that, buddy? Noah looked up, eyes deep and steady, and said something that made Ethan's breath stop. Dad, I can hear your heart. Ethan's face crumpled. He pulled Noah into his arms carefully, respectfully, as if holding something precious. Marisol's hand went to her mouth. Tears blurred the roses. Lucas sniffed dramatically and added, I always heard it. It's loud, but now Noah hears it too. Ethan laughed through tears. You saved me, he whispered to them. Both of you. Lucas shook his head fiercely. No, Lucas said. We just loved you back. Noah tapped Ethan's hand 3 times. Ethan tapped back. Steady now. Marisol watched, heart full and aching, and understood what Elena had done. Elena didn't leave a loophole to protect money. She left a loophole to protect love. Later that night, Ethan invited Marisol to the gallery. Elena's portrait watched them both, serene and knowing. Ethan held the simple ring, Eleanor's first ring, like a relic. "This belonged to our beginning," Ethan said softly, and Elena hid it where only truth could find it. Marisol's voice trembled. "I'm not here for your fortune." "I know," Ethan whispered. "That's why she chose you." He lifted the ring. "Marisol Reyes, will you marry a man who is still healing? A man who might lose money, lose status, but refuses to lose his son's future?" Marisol's tears fell. She pressed her rosary to her palm and whispered, "Yes." In the days that followed, the court ordered a full independent audit. The trust board was suspended pending investigation. Banks regained confidence. Investors calmed when truth replaced rumor. Ethan didn't become perfect overnight. Healing never works like that. But the mansion changed. It filled with paper cranes hanging in the twins' wing. Prayers folded into flight. It echoed with Lucas's loud laughter again. It held Noah's quiet pencil sounds like music. And Ethan began to understand that the wealth he almost lost wasn't his company, it was his heart. If you've made it this far, I want to leave you with one thought. Sometimes the world tries to convince us that love is a liability, especially when it doesn't fit their rules. But in this house, in this family, love became the rescue rope. So here's my question for you. Have you ever seen love look inconvenient to the world, yet be exactly what saved someone? Tell me in the comments, because someone reading your story might need that hope tonight. And if you want more emotional stories like this, stay with us. There's always another heartbeat behind the next door.